The message arrived while the waiter was refilling the water glasses. Renata noticed the vibration before she noticed the name. Her phone moved slightly against the dark wood of the table, just enough to catch her attention between sentences. Across from her, Damon was explaining something about a property deal to the couple beside him. Everyone was laughing. The restaurant's windows were open to the warm Atlanta evening, and the sound of Piedmont traffic drifted in from the street below. For a moment she considered ignoring it. Then it vibrated again. She turned it over. The message was from Wendell. They hadn't spoken in 4 years. The text was short. "Leave quietly." Renata stared at the screen, unsure if she had read it correctly. Another message arrived before she could type a reply. "Don't tell him." The words seemed to sit on the screen longer than they should have. "Renata." She looked up. Damon was watching her now. His hand rested casually on the back of her chair. "You disappeared for a second," he said. "Everything okay?" The people at the table had turned toward her. She smiled automatically. "Just work." Damon leaned closer, lowering his voice. "You promised tonight wasn't about work." He said it lightly, almost teasing. The waiter returned with a bottle of wine. Conversation shifted again. Someone began telling a story about a delayed flight. Renata placed her phone face down beside her plate. The vibration came again. Damon's thumb brushed her shoulder. "You're cold," he said. "I'm fine." Her voice sounded steady. She picked up her glass and took a sip of wine she couldn't taste. A few seconds later, curiosity won. She lifted the phone beneath the table. 3 more messages waited. "He's been moving money." "Your money." "Through a holding company." "You need to leave before he finishes." The room felt suddenly smaller. Across the table, Damon was laughing again. The sound carried easily over the music. He noticed her watching him and lifted his glass in a small toast. She forced another smile. Another message appeared. "Call me." For a moment Renata remained perfectly still. Around her, plates clattered. Someone ordered dessert. The waiter asked if they wanted another bottle. Everything continued as if nothing had changed. But something had. She placed the phone back on the table and folded her hands beside it. Across from her, Damon was still smiling. And for the first time since she had met him, Renata realized she didn't know what that smile meant. The check arrived. Damon reached for it immediately. "No arguments tonight," he said. Outside, the air smelled faintly like rain. He opened the car door for her. "You ready to go home?" Renata hesitated. Then she shook her head. "I need 10 minutes," she said. Damon looked puzzled. "For what?" She lifted her phone. "My brother," she replied. "He says we need to talk." And somewhere beneath the quiet rhythm of the city, something invisible had already begun to unravel. The call lasts 6 minutes. Renata knows this because she watches the timer on the screen the entire time, standing near the side entrance of the restaurant where the AC unit hums against the brick wall and the light from a single fixture overhead makes everything look slightly yellow. Wendell doesn't waste time on greetings. "How much do you have in the joint account?" he asks. "The one at Truist." "The one you opened with him last year." She doesn't answer immediately. "Wendell, just tell me the balance." She presses her back against the wall. Through the door behind her she can hear the faint sound of the dinner table continuing without her. Someone laughs. A chair scrapes the floor. "Why are you asking me that?" "Because I've been watching something for 3 months and I need you to confirm a number before I tell you the rest." 3 months. She turns the phrase over without speaking it aloud. "You've been watching something." "Yes." "What does that mean, Wendell?" He doesn't explain. That was always his way, conclusions before context, and he expected you to keep up. She had found it exhausting when they were younger. Right now it frightens her. "Just tell me the balance," he says. Renata thinks about the last time she checked. Sometime in February. The figure had been comfortable. She had not looked since because there had been no reason to look, or because she had told herself there was no reason, which she now understands is not the same thing. "Around 4.2, she says. "Maybe 4.4. Silence. Not the silence of someone thinking. The other kind. "Wendell. Check it," he says. "Right now while I'm on the line." She pulls the banking app up with one hand. The app loads slowly. She watches the spinning circle, aware of her own breathing, aware of the noise from inside the restaurant, aware that Damon will notice she has been gone too long. The balance appears. She reads it twice. She says nothing for a moment. When did you last look? Wendell asks. February. He's been moving it in pieces. Small enough amounts to avoid automatic flags. It's been going on since November. November. She does the calculation without wanting to. 7 months. She had been sitting across from Damon at breakfast, at dinner, in the car, in bed, for 7 months while this was already happening. How do you know this? She asks. I'll explain later. Right now I need you to go back inside and act like nothing happened. Wendell. Renata. If he suspects you know, the rest moves faster. Do you understand what I'm saying? She understands. She doesn't want to, but she does. Inside, the dinner table sounds the same as it did before she left. Someone is still talking about the flight delay. The same story, still going. I have to go back in, she says. I know. We'll talk tomorrow. Tonight, he says. Call me when you're alone. I don't care what time it is. The call ends. Renata stands for a moment under the yellow light. The AC unit hums. Somewhere above the building, the Atlanta sky is low and overcast. She straightens her dress. She checks her face in the black mirror of the phone screen. Then she opens the door and walks back into the restaurant, and the warmth and the laughter and the smell of food fold around her immediately, and Damon looks up from his conversation and smiles at her from across the table. Everything okay? He asks. Yes, she says. Sorry. He talks too much. She sits down. She picks up her wine glass. Across from her, Damon is already speaking again, his voice easy, his posture relaxed, his hands moving in the particular way they always do when he is performing confidence for an audience. She watches his hands. She had always found that habit charming. She doesn't sleep. Damon does. He falls asleep the way he always does, quickly, completely, one arm folded beneath the pillow, and within 20 minutes his breathing has settled into the slow rhythm she has listened to for 3 years. Renata lies on her side facing the window. The curtains are not fully closed and a narrow strip of light from the street below cuts across the ceiling. She watches it. A car passes. The light shifts briefly, then returns to the same position. At 1:30 she gets up. She takes her phone into the bathroom and sits on the edge of the tub and calls Wendell. He picks up on the second ring. Tell me everything, she says. He does. It takes 40 minutes. She doesn't interrupt. She sits with her back straight and her free hand pressed flat against her knee and listens to Wendell explain that he first noticed something in December when a contact mentioned Damon's name in connection with a property transaction that didn't add up. What kind of contact? She asks. Someone in documentation. Title company adjacent. She waits for more. He doesn't offer it. Wendell. It doesn't matter who. What matters is what they saw. What they saw was a transfer out of a jointly held account. Not hers specifically, not at first. But the name attached to the receiving account appeared again 2 weeks later in a different transaction, and then again after that, and by the time Wendell's contact began paying attention there were 6 transfers across 4 months, all structured to stay beneath the threshold that would trigger an automatic review. How much total? She asks. He tells her. She closes her eyes. That's not restructuring, she says. No. Damon told me last year he was moving some investments around. Consolidating. I know. You know? He told Clarice the same thing in 2019. The name lands quietly. Renata opens her eyes. Who is Clarice? Wendell is silent for a moment. Not evasive, considering. Someone I need you to meet, he says. But not yet. She wants to push. She doesn't. The joint account, she says instead. Can he access it without my signature? Under the terms you signed, either party can initiate a transfer up to a certain threshold without dual authorization. She remembers signing those forms. A Sunday afternoon, the bank officer across a wide desk, Damon beside her making a quiet joke about the length of the paperwork. She had skimmed the terms. She had trusted the context. She stands up from the edge of the tub and moves to the small window above the sink. Outside, the street is mostly quiet. A security light at the building opposite casts a pale circle on the pavement. How long before the account is empty, she asks. At the current rate? 2 months. Maybe less if he accelerates. And my other accounts? The ones in my name only. That's what I don't know yet. She absorbs this. There's something else, Wendell says. Tell me. The transfers don't go to a single destination. They move through at least 2 intermediate accounts before they land anywhere traceable. Whoever structured this knew what they were doing. This wasn't Damon alone. She turns the tap on briefly, runs cold water over her wrist, turns it off. What are you saying? I'm saying he had help. Professional help. From the bedroom, she hears Damon shift in his sleep. The mattress sighs. Then silence again. I have to go, she says. Renata. I heard everything you said. Don't confront him. I won't. I mean it. Not yet. Not until we know the full shape of it. She looks at herself in the bathroom mirror. The light in here is harsh and direct, and she looks exactly like someone who has not slept and has just been told something she cannot unhear. She turns off the bathroom light and opens the door and moves back into the dark bedroom and lies down beside her husband. His breathing hasn't changed. She stares at the ceiling. The strip of light from the street is still there, cutting across the plaster in the same position it was in an hour ago, as if nothing in the room has moved at all. Wendell lives in an apartment in Westview that smells like old paper and takeout he hasn't thrown away. Renata hasn't been inside it in 4 years, and standing at the door the following evening, she notices that almost nothing has changed. The same dark curtains. The same side table with too many things on it. A ceiling fan turning slowly above a room that is slightly too warm. He opens the door before she knocks. You cut your hair, he says. 2 years ago. He steps aside to let her in. They don't hug. They never did, even before the falling out. She sits on the sofa. Wendell goes to the kitchen without asking and comes back with 2 bottles of cold water. He sets one in front of her and takes the chair across from her and looks at her the way he has always looked at her, directly, without the social softening most people apply to difficult conversations. You look tired, he says. I didn't sleep. I know. She opens the water. Why did we stop talking? He considers this. You chose him over the question, he says. What question? The one I asked you before the wedding. She remembers the question. She had dismissed it at the time as the particular friction of an older brother who had appointed himself a guardian long past the age when guardianship was welcome. You asked me what I actually knew about him, she says. Yes. I thought you were being difficult. I know. Neither of them says anything for a moment. The ceiling fan turns. Somewhere in the building a television is on, the sound too muffled to make out. Tell me about Clarice, Renata says. Wendell sets his water down. Clarice Mouton, 39 years old. An architect based in Houston who met Damon at a conference in Dallas in 2017. They were together for 14 months. She ended it when she discovered that a joint investment account they had opened together had been steadily drained over the final 6 months of the relationship. She thought it was a business loss at first, Wendell says. He had an explanation ready. Contractor delays. A project that fell through. She accepted it because the explanation arrived before she thought to ask. How much did she lose? He tells her. Renata is quiet. How do you know her? She asks. She reached out to me 7 months ago. Through someone we both know from Howard. She had been looking for anyone connected to Damon, trying to understand whether what happened to her was deliberate or just bad luck. And you didn't tell me. I tried. You weren't speaking to me. She looks at her hands. That part is true. She had blocked Wendell's number for nearly a year following an argument at their mother's birthday that had started about something else entirely and ended, as their arguments always did, on the subject of Damon. She had unblocked him eventually without acknowledging that she had done so, and they had exchanged occasional messages in the months since, brief, careful, neither of them referencing what had happened. Is she willing to talk to me? Renata asks. She's been waiting for you to exist, Wendell says. That's how she put it. What does that mean? She suspected there was someone after her. She didn't know who. She just knew the pattern didn't stop with her. Renata stands up. She walks to the window and looks out at the street below. 2 kids are on bikes, circling slowly under a streetlight. A woman with grocery bags moves between parked cars without slowing down. He came home last night, Renata says. Made tea. Watched something on his laptop. Came to bed. She pauses. He kissed my forehead before he turned the light off. Wendell doesn't respond. I lay there thinking, which version is performing? The one I've known for 3 years, or the one you're describing? That's the wrong question, Wendell says. She turns from the window. What's the right one? He looks at her steadily. Whether there's a difference. Outside, the kids are still circling. The woman with the grocery bags has already disappeared around the corner. Renata picks up her water bottle from the table. She doesn't finish it. Clarice sends the files on a Thursday morning. No message attached. Just a compressed folder that arrives through an encrypted transfer app Wendell had set up, and inside it, bank statements, screenshots, a scanned copy of an investment agreement, and a single photograph of a document Renata doesn't immediately recognize. She opens everything at her office desk with the door locked and her work laptop pushed to one side. The statements come first. Clarice's joint account with Damon had opened in March 2018 with an initial deposit from her side. Over the following months, Damon made several smaller deposits, enough to maintain the appearance of shared contribution, before the withdrawals began. They followed the same architecture Wendell had described. Small, consistent, spaced at intervals that suggested awareness of monitoring thresholds. She pulls up her own truest statements on her phone beside the laptop. The structure is identical. Not similar. Identical. The same spacing. The same incremental amounts. The same pattern of a slightly larger withdrawal every third cycle, as if whoever designed it had run a version of this before and refined it. She sits with that for a long time. The photograph of the document takes longer to understand. It appears to be a registration certificate for a limited liability company. The company name means nothing to her, a 3-word construction that sounds like a consulting firm. The registration date is 2016. Damon's name does not appear on it anywhere. But in the member field, listed second, is a name she recognizes. Reginald Cross. She stares at it. Reginald Cross is Damon's closest friend. They went to Morehouse together. He had been at their wedding. He had given a speech that made the room laugh, and had danced with Renata's mother during the reception. She photographs the document with her phone. Then she opens her browser and searches the company name. The registration is real. She finds it in the state business database without difficulty. The company's listed address is a registered agent office in Buckhead. Its stated business activity is described as real estate investment and financial advisory. She writes the address down. She searches Reginald Cross next. His LinkedIn profile is professionally maintained. A career in wealth management, several corporate affiliations. Nothing irregular on the surface. But the second firm listed in his experience section, one he apparently advised between 2017 and 2020, shares a registered agent address with the company in Clarice's document. She writes that down too. By midday, she has 4 pages of handwritten notes and a growing awareness that she cannot determine, from what she has in front of her, whether what she is looking at constitutes fraud. That is the problem. Every structure she has found could be explained. LLCs exist for legitimate reasons. Transfers beneath monitoring thresholds are not automatically suspicious. Joint accounts drain for many reasons. A shared registered agent between 2 companies could be coincidence or cost-sharing. Damon had always been vague about his business dealings in the way that certain men are vague, not evasive exactly, but expansive in a manner that made specific follow-up feel unnecessary or intrusive. She had never pressed. She had interpreted his vagueness as confidence, as the easy disinterest of someone who didn't need to explain himself because his competence was self-evident. She closes her notes. She sits back in her chair. Through her office window, the afternoon is flat and bright. A car alarm somewhere nearby cycles twice and stops. Her phone shows 2 messages from Damon sent an hour apart. The first, thinking of you. The second, reservation at Bones tonight? You pick the time. She reads them both. She puts the phone face down on the desk. The question Wendell had asked her Whether there's a difference, comes back without warning and settles into the room like something that has decided to stay. She picks up her pen. She writes one more thing on the notepad. Who else? Then she tears the page off, folds it once, and locks it in the small drawer beneath her desk that she has never given Damon a key to, because when she moved into this office 3 years ago, she had only made one copy and had never thought, until this moment, to wonder why. She goes to dinner. She picks the time, 8 o'clock, and sends the reply without deliberating over it, because deliberation would show, and she has decided, somewhere between locking her desk drawer and walking to her car, that the most dangerous thing she can do right now is hesitate visibly. Damon is already at the table when she arrives. He stands when he sees her. He always does this, rises slightly from his seat when she approaches, a habit she had once described to her friend Shayla as old-fashioned in the best possible way. She slides into the chair across from him and accepts the menu and asks about his afternoon and listens to him answer, and the conversation moves the way it always moves between them, easily, without gaps, without the particular friction that accumulates in relationships where people have stopped paying attention to each other. She pays attention to everything. The way he holds his glass loosely, 2 fingers on the stem. The way he glances toward the door when a new group enters, a quick assessment that lasts less than a second before his eyes return to her. The slight pause before he answers her question about Reginald. She had introduced Reginald's name deliberately. Casually, in the middle of a sentence about an event she had invented, a mutual acquaintances thing, she said. She couldn't remember who mentioned it, and she had watched Damon's face while she said it. Nothing dramatic. No flinch. No recalibration. Just the pause. Half a beat longer than the conversation required. Haven't spoken to him in a couple of weeks, Damon says. He's been traveling. Somewhere interesting? He didn't say. She nods and looks back at her menu. The pause meant nothing definitive. It could have been distraction. It could have been the noise from a nearby table. It could have been exactly what it appeared to be, a man briefly searching his memory for information about a friend. She orders the fish. Damon orders his usual and makes a comment about the wine list that makes the server smile, and they settle into the middle portion of the evening, the part that has always felt most natural between them. The part where they are simply 2 people who enjoy each other's company, where the conversation moves from small things to larger ones without effort, where she forgets sometimes that she married him and remembers only that she likes him. That is the thing nobody warns you about. Not the fear of discovering something wrong. The fear of discovering it in someone you still like. Someone whose specific laugh, whose way of tilting his head when he disagrees, whose habit of leaving one light on in every room he exits, all of it still lands in you the same way it always did. She eats her food. She asks about his mother's procedure, scheduled for the following month. He gives her an update. She asks whether he has spoken to the contractor about the water damage in the second bathroom. He says he's following up on Friday. She files this away, not because it matters, but because she is now cataloging the texture of his evasions alongside the texture of his honesty, and she needs both to understand the difference. On the way home, he plays music from his phone through the car speakers. Something old. He drums his fingers on the steering wheel. You seem quiet, he says. I'm tired. Busy week? Yes. He glances at her briefly. You tell me if something was wrong. It is not quite a question. She looks out at the road ahead. The Atlanta night is moving past the window the way it always does, the particular brightness of Buckhead giving way to the quieter dark of their neighborhood. Of course, she says. He reaches over and squeezes her hand once. Then he returns his hand to the wheel. She looks down at her hand in her lap. In her bag, her phone holds 4 photographs of documents, 2 pages of handwritten notes, and 3 unanswered questions she has not yet found the language to ask anyone. She watches the road. She keeps her breathing even. And when they get home and Damon unlocks the front door and holds it open and says after you the way he has said it 1,000 times before, she walks inside without breaking her stride. Clarice is smaller than Renata expected. She doesn't know why she had built a particular image, something larger, perhaps, more visibly marked by what had happened to her. But the woman who walks into the coffee shop in Midtown on a Saturday morning is compact and self-contained, with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of posture that suggests she has spent time deciding how to occupy space without apology. They recognize each other without introduction. Clarice sits down and orders without looking at the menu and gets to the point before the drinks arrive. He told me the transfers were for a land purchase in the Hill Country. He said the sellers required cash movement through specific accounts for tax reasons. Did you believe him? I believed the version of him I thought I knew. She sets her phone on the table, which is a different thing. Renata looks at the phone. On the screen is a name and a number. That's the third one, Clarice says. Renata looks up. Her name is Yolanda. She's in Memphis. They were together in 2021. She lost access to a business account she had made him a signatory on. He had convinced her it was for a joint venture, and by the time she realized what had happened, the account had been restructured twice, and the money was somewhere she couldn't follow. Renata stares at the name on the screen. How did you find her? She found me. 8 months after it happened, she started searching. She found a property listing that had Damon's name on it alongside a company she didn't recognize. She searched the company. It led her to documentation that led her, eventually, to someone who had heard my name connected to his. That's a long chain. People who've been taken from tend to look, Clarice says. It just takes time to find each other. The drinks arrive. Neither of them touches theirs immediately. Yolanda spoke to a lawyer, Clarice continues. The lawyer said the account restructuring was technically legal. The signatory arrangement had given him the authority to do what he did. Everything was structured to sit just inside what could be challenged. Meaning whoever helped him knew exactly where the line was. Yes. Renata thinks about the LLC registration. The shared agent address. Reginald Cross's name appearing in the member field of a company that had been registered 2 years before Damon met Clarice. This wasn't built for any one of us, she says. Clarice looks at her. No, she says. It wasn't. They sit with that. Outside the coffee shop, the Saturday morning is moving at its own pace. Cars, a street vendor on the corner, 2 women at the outdoor table beside them laughing about something on a shared phone screen. The ordinary texture of a weekend. Have you spoken to anyone official? Renata asks. Yolanda has. Informally, with someone at the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit in Memphis. She was told the documentation she had wasn't sufficient on its own. They needed a pattern. Multiple instances with consistent methodology. And now there are 3 of us. At least, Clarice says. The word lands quietly between them. At least. Renata picks up her drink. How many do you think there are? Clarice looks out through the window for a moment. A considered pause, not evasive, the pause of someone who has asked herself the same question and arrived somewhere uncomfortable. I stopped at 3, she says. Not because I thought it ended there. Because I needed to stop somewhere, or I would keep looking indefinitely and never do anything with what I found. Renata understands this. Yolanda is willing to make a formal statement, Clarice says. I am too. But it works better with someone current. Someone with access to active documentation. Someone still inside it. Yes. Renata sets her cup down. Through the window, a child is pulling at a woman's hand, trying to redirect her towards something the woman cannot see yet. The woman resists briefly, then allows herself to be led. I need to talk to Wendell, Renata says. I know. Clarice picks up her phone from the table and slides it into her bag. He said you'd say that. He knows you well. He knows how people respond when the size of something becomes clear. She stands, adjusting the strap of her bag. It's not a criticism. It's just the moment when you realize you're not the story. You're a chapter. She leaves enough on the table for both drinks. Renata remains at the table after she goes, her hands around her cup, watching the street outside continue its ordinary Saturday morning as if none of the last 40 minutes had taken place at all. The FBI contact is a woman named Audra Sims. Wendell arranges the introduction through Yolanda's lawyer, and the first meeting happens not in a field office, but in a conference room at the back of a law firm in Buckhead that Sims apparently uses for conversations she doesn't want attached to any official location yet. She is younger than Renata expected. Late 30s. She arrives in plain clothes, orders nothing, and listens to everything Renata presents: the statements, the photographs, the LLC registration, the name Reginald Cross, without writing anything down. When Renata finishes, Sims is quiet for a moment. "The documentation is suggestive," she says. "It isn't conclusive." "I know. What we need is movement. A transfer large enough to establish clear intent, executed while we have eyes on the account." "How long would that take to arrange?" Sims looks at her steadily. "That depends on how long you can maintain your current situation." Renata understands what is being asked without it being asked directly. She drives home through the evening traffic with the AC on full and both hands on the wheel and thinks about the word maintain. What it requires. How long a person can sustain a performance before the performance begins to cost something that cannot be recovered. Sims had said one more thing before Renata left. "There's a secondary concern. Your brother has a financial relationship with some of the same offshore structures we've been watching. I'm not telling you not to trust him. I'm telling you to be careful about what you share with him and when." Renata had not responded to this. She had thanked Sims, gathered her documents, and walked out into the Buckhead afternoon. Now, merging onto the highway, she runs the implication the way she runs numbers, dispassionately, in sequence. Wendell had come to her with information. He had connected her to Clarice. He had arranged the introduction to Sims. Every step had moved in the right direction. But the direction something moves and the reason it moves are not always the same thing. She takes the exit toward home. Damon is in the kitchen when she gets back. He is making the gumbo he makes on weekend evenings when he is in a particular mood, unhurried, slightly domestic, the kind of mood that had made her feel, in the first year of their marriage, that she had chosen correctly. He looks up when she comes in. "You're late," he says. Not accusatory. Observational. "Traffic on 285. Sit." "It's almost ready." She sits at the kitchen island and watches him move between the stove and the counter. He knows this kitchen the way people know spaces they have inhabited without thinking, reaching for things before looking, adjusting the heat without checking, moving with the ease of someone entirely comfortable in the present moment. She watches his hands. "Reginald called today," Damon says. She keeps her expression exactly where it is. "Oh. He's back from Charlotte. Wants to do something next weekend. I said I'd check with you." "Sure," she says. "That's fine." He ladles food into a bowl and sets it in front of her. He stands on the other side of the island and blows on his own spoon before tasting it, decides it needs something, reaches for the seasoning. "You seem far away," he says. "Just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately." She looks up at him. "Work," she says. "The Houston client. You know how it gets." He nods. They eat without speaking for a while. The food is good. It is always good. She had told him once, early in their relationship, that it was the best she had ever tasted, and he had laughed and said his grandmother would be relieved to hear it, and the memory of that exchange sits now in the middle of the meal like something misplaced. "I was thinking," Damon says, setting his spoon down, "about the Nashville property." She waits. "The timeline has shifted slightly. I may need to move some funds around next month. Liquidity thing. I wanted you to know in advance." He says it the way he says most things, openly, without apparent subtext, with the particular transparency of someone who has nothing to hide or has practiced having nothing to hide until the distinction no longer shows. She picks up her spoon. "How much are we talking?" she asks. He gives her a number. It is not the number she is afraid of. It is smaller, plausible, the kind of figure that belongs in the category of routine financial movement. She wonders if this is the approach. A smaller transfer first, to normalize the conversation. To make the larger one, when it comes, feel like continuation rather than rupture. "That's fine," she says. "Just let me know when." He picks up his spoon again. "I will," he says. Later she lies awake in the dark and reconstructs both conversations, Damon's and Sims's, word by word. She turns each sentence over. She traces the probable next step and the step after that. Wendell's name surfaces without her inviting it. The offshore structures Sims mentioned. The 4 years of silence before his call. She doesn't resolve it. She leaves it open, the way you leave a door open in a house where you aren't certain what's on the other side. The ceiling is the same ceiling it has always been. The breathing beside her is the same breathing. But the room has become something else entirely, and she is the only person in it who knows. Sims calls on a Tuesday. Not from any number Renata has saved. A different one each time. A disciplined Sims had explained at their second meeting without elaborating on why it was necessary, in a tone that suggested the explanation itself was the point. He's moving, Sims says. Renata is at her desk. Her office door is closed. She swivels her chair away from the window and lowers her voice. When? The instruction was issued this morning. The transfer is staged for Friday. End of business. Friday is 3 days away. How much? Sims tells her. Renata writes nothing down. She repeats the figure silently, twice, committing it the way she has learned to commit things over the past 6 weeks, without paper, without record, inside a part of herself she has come to think of as a separate room. The amount is not the final amount. It is not everything. But it is large enough to constitute clear intent. Large enough to move the documentation from suggestive to actionable. What do I do? Renata asks. Nothing different, Sims says. That's the instruction. You do nothing different. The call ends in under 2 minutes. She does nothing different. On Tuesday evening, Damon comes home with pralines from a bakery he likes and a film he wants to watch, and they sit on the sofa the way they always sit, her feet drawn up beside her, him with his arm along the back of the cushion, and she watches the film without retaining any of it. On Wednesday, he mentions the transfer again. Casually, over breakfast, the way he had promised, just letting you know, and she nods and says thank you for the heads up and refills her coffee and stands at the kitchen counter for a moment with her back to him, her face doing whatever it needs to do, before she turns around. Everything okay with the Nashville timeline? She asks. Fine, he says. Should wrap up cleanly. She nods again. He leaves for a meeting at 8:30. She sits at the kitchen table for several minutes after the door closes, her coffee going cold in front of her, and thinks about the word cleanly. Thursday is the longest day she can remember. She gets through client calls, a site review, a late lunch she doesn't finish. Wendell messages twice, no content, just a checkmark, their agreed signal that nothing has changed on his end. She replies with the same. She does not tell him what Sims said about the offshore structures. She files the omission carefully and moves on. At 4 in the afternoon, Clarice sends a single message. Yolanda confirmed. She's ready. Renata stares at this for a moment. Ready means Yolanda has finalized her formal statement. Ready means that when Friday's transfer executes, there will be 3 documented instances, 3 women, 3 accounts, 3 variations of the same architecture, available to investigators simultaneously. She puts her phone in her bag. She goes back to work. That evening, Damon is in a good mood. Not unusually so. Not the elevated brightness of someone performing relief. Just the particular ease of a man who believes the week is resolving the way it should. He cooks. He asks about her Houston client. He finds something funny and reads it to her across the kitchen. She laughs at the right moment. She asks a follow-up question. She refills his glass. And somewhere in the middle of the evening, she becomes aware of something she hadn't anticipated, not fear exactly, and not grief yet, but the particular sensation of standing at the edge of a before. Knowing that the after begins in less than 24 hours, and that nothing on the other side of it will resemble what came before, regardless of how the next few days resolve. She thinks about Clarice and her coffee shop posture, compact and self-contained. She thinks about Yolanda, whom she has never met, finalizing a statement in a lawyer's office in Memphis. She thinks about Wendell in his Westview apartment, tracking something for months in silence, and then she stops, because she doesn't know anymore whether that silence was protection or positioning, and she cannot afford to follow that thought all the way to its end tonight. Damon turns off the kitchen light. Coming, he says from the doorway. She looks at the kitchen, the cleaned counter, the folded dish towel, the single light left on above the stove, his particular habit, the one she had catalogued without knowing she was cataloging it. In a minute, she says. He goes. She stands in the kitchen alone for a moment. Then she takes her phone from her bag and opens the banking app and looks at the joint account balance one last time. Not because she needs the number, she already has it, but because she wants to see it as it is, intact. Before Friday changes whatever Friday is going to change. The balance sits on the screen. She closes the app. She turns off the light above the stove. And she walks out of the kitchen and down the hallway toward the sound of Damon moving around in the bedroom, and the house is quiet around her, and outside the city is doing what the city always does, indifferent and continuous. And tomorrow is already hours closer than it was this morning. The transfer executes at 4:47 p.m. on Friday. Renata knows this because Sim sends the checkmark at 4:49, and because at 4:51 her banking app issues a notification she has been waiting for and dreading in equal measure, a debit alert. The figure matching exactly what Sims had told her on Tuesday, moving out of the joint account toward the first intermediate stop in a chain that investigators have been watching since Wednesday morning. She is in her car in the office parking deck when it happens. She had not been able to stay at her desk. She sits with the engine off and the windows up and reads the notification twice. Then she puts the phone on the passenger seat and looks at the concrete pillar directly in front of her car and breathes. Sims had said, "When the transfer executes, do not contact anyone. Go home. Act as you have been acting. We move from our end." She starts the engine. Damon is not home when she arrives. This is not unusual. She puts her bag down and changes her clothes and starts water boiling for no particular reason, the need to do something with her hands, and she is standing at the stove when she hears his key in the lock at 6:30. She turns. He comes in and stops when he sees her face. Not her expression. She is certain her expression is correct. But something else, some quality of stillness in the room, or in her, that he reads before she can adjust for it. "What's wrong?" he says. "Nothing. Long day." He sets his bag down slowly. "You've been crying." She hasn't. But she understands why he might look for that. "I haven't," she says. "Come and eat." He doesn't move toward the kitchen. He stands in the entryway with his bag at his feet and looks at her with an attention she recognizes from the early months of their relationship, the focused, unblinking quality he brought to things he was trying to assess. "Did someone call you?" he asks. "About what?" A pause. "About anything." She turns back to the stove. "Shayla called earlier. Her father is unwell." She adjusts the heat beneath the pot. "Sit down, Damon." She hears him move. Not toward the kitchen. Toward the bedroom. She keeps her back to the hallway. She hears him in the bedroom, the particular sounds of a man looking for something. A drawer opening. The closet. His laptop bag unzipping. She does not move. She does not call out. She stands at the stove with both hands on the counter and waits. When he comes back into the kitchen, his phone is in his hand and his face has changed. Not dramatically. Just a subtle compression around the eyes, a setting of the jaw, the particular expression of someone who has done a calculation and arrived at a number they were not prepared for. "There's a problem with the transfer," he says. His voice is steady. "What transfer?" she says. He looks at her. The silence between them is different from every silence that has preceded it in 3 years of marriage. It has a different weight, a different temperature. "Renata." "What transfer, Damon?" He sets his phone on the counter. He looks at it. He looks at her. And something in the quality of her stillness, the absolute, practiced, 6-week stillness she has constructed and maintained every day since a restaurant table and a vibrating phone, tells him something that she did not intend to reveal and cannot now take back. "How long?" he says. She says nothing. "How long have you?" He stops. Recalibrates. The version of him that finishes that sentence with wounded confusion is visibly available. She can see it forming, and then it doesn't come. He abandons it. "Who have you been talking to?" "I think you should sit down." "I don't want to sit down." "Damon." "Was it Wendell?" His voice is still controlled, but the control is no longer effortless. "It was Wendell." "I knew he stops again. Picks up his phone. Puts it down. "This is not what you think it is." "You don't know what I think. There's an explanation for the account. There are things happening with the business that I haven't." "Clarice Mouton," she says. The name stops him completely. Not a flinch. Something more total than a flinch. A full stop, the kind that happens in the body before it reaches the face. She watches it happen. "And Yolanda," she says. He is very still now. The kitchen hums. The water on the stove has begun to boil, and the lid is rattling slightly against the pot, but neither of them moves toward it. "I want you to leave," she says. "Tonight." "Renata, I've spoken to people who are more qualified than me to continue this conversation with you. I have nothing more to say." He looks at her for a long moment. She holds it. Then he picks up his phone from the counter and walks back down the hallway, and she hears the closet again, faster this time, and the zip of a bag, and then movement, and then the front door. The latch clicks. She stands at the stove. The water boils. She reaches over and turns off the heat. Then she sits down on the kitchen floor with her back against the cabinet and her knees drawn up, and she stays there for a while, in the particular silence of a house that now contains only one person, until her phone buzzes on the counter above her head. She reaches up without standing. "Sims. He's in custody. Are you okay?" She looks at the message. She thinks about the question. Then she types, "Yes." She puts the phone back on the counter. She stays on the floor a little longer. 3 weeks after Damon is taken in, a woman calls Renata from a number she doesn't recognize. Her name is Portia. She is calling from Birmingham. She had been with Damon for 9 months in 2015, before Clarice, before Yolanda, before Renata. She had found Renata's name through a journalist who had picked up fragments of the story from court filings that were technically public, but practically inaccessible to anyone who wasn't already looking. Renata listens. She takes notes. She gives Portia Wendell's number and Clarice's number, and tells her to call Yolanda's lawyer in Memphis, who has been coordinating the formal statements. When the call ends, she sits at her kitchen table and looks at her notepad. For names now. For accounts. For variations of the same architecture applied to 4 different women across 10 years. She writes the number 10 in the margin and stares at it. Reginald Cross is brought in separately, on a Wednesday, on charges related to the corporate structures, the registered LLCs, the shared agent addresses, the layered transfer mechanisms that could not have been designed without professional knowledge of how financial monitoring works. Renata is not in the room when this happens. She is at her office, in a client meeting when Wendell sends the checkmark. She excuses herself briefly, reads the message, and goes back inside. Clarice comes to Atlanta in the 2nd month. They meet at the same coffee shop in Midtown where they had first met, and they order the same drinks without discussing it. "Portia reached out to me," Clarice says. "I gave her your number." "I know." She turns her cup slowly on the table. "She said there may be someone else. Before 2015. Renata looks at her. She found a reference in some old records. A name she couldn't verify. A joint account closed in 2013. Did she follow it? She's trying. They sit with this. The Saturday morning crowd moves around them. A child at the next table is constructing something from a straw and a napkin, focused and serious. Her mother is on her phone, not watching. Does it end? Renata asks. Clarice doesn't answer immediately. The legal part ends, she says eventually. The other part, she shakes her head slightly. I still check my accounts every morning. I've done it every morning for 3 years. I'll probably do it tomorrow. Renata understands this. 2 days before the sentencing, Sims calls. She doesn't lead with the case. She asks how Renata is doing, and Renata gives the answer she has been giving everyone, and then Sims says there's something she should know before the proceedings. The offshore structures they had been tracking, the ones Sims had mentioned in passing at their first meeting, the ones connected to Wendell, had been part of the original investigation longer than Renata knew. Wendell had not been a target. But he had not been entirely clear either. The payments he had received over 4 years had been characterized, in his own statement to investigators, as fees for monitoring services. Monitoring services. Renata sits with the phrase. Is he being charged? She asks. No, Sims says. His cooperation offset the exposure. But I thought you should hear it from me before you heard it in the room. Renata thanks her. She sits at her desk for a long time after the call ends. The sentencing happens on a Thursday afternoon in a courthouse downtown that smells like old carpet and recycled air. Renata attends. Clarice attends. Yolanda attends. Portia attends, having driven up from Birmingham the night before and slept in a hotel 2 blocks away because she hadn't wanted to ask anyone for a place to stay. They sit together, but not touching, for women in a row, each one present for her own reasons and aware that the others are present for theirs. Damon is brought in. He looks the same. That is the thing she hadn't prepared for. He walks in the same way he always walked, and he looks at the room with the same assessing attention she has known for 3 years. He finds her in the row. He holds her gaze for a moment. She holds it back. Then he looks away. Reginald Cross receives a concurrent sentence in a separate proceeding. Outside, on the courthouse steps, the 4 women stand in the afternoon light and Portia says something low that makes Clarice exhale a short compressed sound that is almost, but not quite a laugh. Renata doesn't ask what was said. She puts on her sunglasses. Wendell is waiting at the bottom of the steps. He looks up when he sees her and lifts his chin slightly, the particular gesture of acknowledgement he has used her entire life, and she walks down toward him, and they stand together for a moment without speaking. She thinks about monitoring services. She thinks about 4 years of payments. She thinks about a phone call at a restaurant table and the question of whether the person making it was protecting her or managing her, and she understands that she may never know which one it was, or whether there is a difference, and that this is the thing she will carry longest, longer than the account numbers, longer than the court documents, longer than the sound of a latch clicking in an empty house. "Are you all right?" Wendell asks. She looks at him. "I don't know yet," she says. He nods. They walk to the car. Behind her, Clarice and Yolanda and Portia are still on the steps, talking in the low, unhurried way of people who have nowhere urgent to be and something real to say to each other. She doesn't look back. She gets in the car. Wendell drives. Atlanta moves past the windows the way it always does, uninterrupted, indifferent, continuous, and somewhere in the middle of the drive home, she realizes she has not thought about the joint account in 11 days. She isn't sure what that means yet. She watches the road. She lets the city be loud around her. And she doesn't try, right now, to make it mean anything at all.